You know, they're selling you all wolf tickets, people. You're eating them right up.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?
I back. Trust me, I back.
But I'm not impressed by your performance.
You'll do nothing. You'll do nothing. Shut your fucking mouth, you'll do nothing. You'll do fucking nothing. Not one of you will do nothing.
I'll tell you what, bro. You know, I was out there, I was fighting all the hitters, bro. You ain't fought no hitters.
Come on, guys. It's normal.
I'm not saying I would fight you. I would kill you.
John, do you think I'm just gonna sit there and let you kill me, John? I mean, really?
No, don't be scared, homie.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the fuck he wants.
I'm gonna beat you into the living death. I mean, maybe that's your job, but where I come from, you know, people like that get slapped.
That's fucking illegal.
Next year, you just shook up the world. How's that feel?
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Yeah, this is a simulated death match. And you haven't simulated anybody's death yet.
I said it last year. We're not here just to take part. We're here to take over.
What is the game plan going in against him?
The game plan is you go in there, hit him with some good shit, don't get hit, and come home with a pocket full of cash.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
I'm gonna go home tonight. I'm gonna drink a Coors Light. That's a Coors Light because Bud Light won't pay me nothing.
Do you want to be a fighter? That is my question.
Any of you radio personalities think you want smoke? Call me Mr. Chimney. I want smoke.
How is everyone doing? What is up? It's MCR. I'm Matt, the Hipster Hunter. Find me, Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. We're going to be covering all things MMA today. And I'm joined by the one and only, the lovely, the illustrious, the notorious, bringing sexy back in the MMA industry, Mr. Anthony Walk from ShareDog.com and MMA On Point. Because I have to mention that now because you get noticed for that now in the streets, it seems.
Yeah, that's it's kind of strange for me. It ran up on it because I'm a ghostwriter behind the scenes. Yeah, but yeah.
I love it. But Anthony, how are you doing today, man? Or tonight, I should say.
I'm pretty good, man. Just tired. It's been a long day. Enjoyed the Labor Day weekend. But of course, the night before it's time to start regular life, I couldn't sleep. So here I am, all exhausted and shit. But happy to see you, my man. What's up with you?
Yes, man. It's been a while, man, since the last night with Submission Radio guys and Oscar Willis from Mac Life. I'm still semi-recovering from that night.
I don't remember much of that night, but I think it was a good night.
That was so rough that next day. But anyways, digressing from that, obviously UFC 242 is coming up this weekend in Abu Dhabi. Khabib Nurmagomedov defending his lightweight title against Dustin Poirier. We're going to break down that fight and some of the card, though the card really isn't that deep. Obviously breaking down the breaking news that was today of Cris Cyborg going to Bellator, which wasn't that shocking, but still a massive shift for a massive name in the sport. And plus breaking down some of the UFC antitrust hearing that happened this last week. Obviously, Paul Gift, John Nash, and Jason Cruz over at Bloody Elbow were there for all the hearings, were in the courtroom. They broke it down on their podcast and all of their other websites. We're going to sort of piece together some of it, try to describe it, or at least
talk about it in some way.
Yeah, interpret it in a way that we can discuss. Because, look, like, talking about wage share and wage level is, I think, over 90% of people's heads in this space. That's not a knock on anyone. It's me included in that 90%.
Yeah, we're not business experts. Like, that's kind of what it is. And all those three guys, they specialize in either business or legal matters. Shout out to Patrick O.J., who works at ShareDog as well, and Body Lock MMA, who's also been following the story very closely. And his insights, I think, are very good as far as the layman understanding of what's going on, because it's a lot of legalese, a lot of complex business things that just not made for the average man.
No, and that's okay. And we're just going to try to break it down as best as we can, because it is a massive news story in the MMA space that is obviously going to take a long time to for sort of come to fruition, but it is still a massive news story that we need to dissect and break down. But first, obviously, UFC 242 is this weekend on Saturday. Anthony, thoughts on the main event? Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier. I'm of the mindset that this fight is far closer than people think, that Dustin Poirier has a legit chance of pulling off the upset, that his blend of striking ability, overall grappling ability might give Khabib a lot of issues when going back and watching fights as of late for this fight. Khabib struggles. We portray him as this dominant force throughout this division, and there's been numerous fights where people did have success in rounds. Hell, even the Conor McGregor fight in last October was far more competitive in that third and even the beginning of the fourth round than I think people remember. But a lot to dissect with this fight. So, Ant, your thoughts on the main event in terms of in the cage sort of stylistic matchup?
As far as the X's and O's go, I think you're right on because this is, like, for the record, I'm favoring Khabib to win this fight, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a steamrolling as we're used to. Like, I don't think it's going to resemble anything like the Edson Barboza fight or even the Conor fight, which, Conor did win that third round in my opinion, but overall he got dominated. So I don't see it happening that way because Poirier poses a lot of problems. One, he hits very hard, as Max Holloway can attest to. He's a very, very strong guy at 155. He also has the tendency of throwing a lot of uppercuts and knees as well, and that's kind of the kryptonite for guys who like to shoot in for that straight takedown attempt. So there are a lot of things that Dustin can do in this fight, and also he has the right mindset coming into it. I believe, like Poirier has kind of perpetually been the underdog in a lot of cases and has risen to the occasion many times. I think this is. I think no matter what happens, I think Poirier will make a very good showing for himself.
Agreed. And on top of that, Luke Thomas did a fantastic breakdown of the takedown defense of Dustin Poirier, adding how a lot of his takedown defense is predicated off of his grappling, that he basically uses guillotines and certain arm locks, certain kimuras as a way to defend takedowns, and then uses that for transition scrambles to basically have control of the grappling exchange. And I am curious to see that dynamic with Khabib, because Khabib is a chain wrestler. He's a guy that isn't really going to get you with the first takedown attempt. Naturally, Khabib actually is a guy that can't take you down in space. If you're in the middle of the cage, you actually have a lot of advantages to keep the fight standing. Conor was able to do that in the third round, for example, right?
Right. Even look at the first round. The very first takedown in that fight, had Conor not re-engaged on in the grappling, when that initial shot, he stuffed it and looked like he got his hips away, and then he decided to try to take his back, and that's all that Khabib needed to grab a limb and then hold on for dear life and kind of reestablish the chain wrestling.
Interesting. Also, apart from that breakdown from Luke Thomas, is that Dustin Poirier in his lightweight run, he's only lost one time against Michael Johnson with I'm not gonna say a fluke knockout, but that was a one punch knockout sort of in the first round. The rest of his lightweight run, he's won every single fight except for the no contest, obviously in the first Eddie Alvarez fight. But most of those fighters, I would say, aren't really wrestlers, right? Like even Eddie Alvarez, in the most part, isn't the dominant wrestler like Khabib is. Justin Gaethje, while a decent wrestler, isn't really the wrestler like Khabib is.
Yeah, he doesn't use it as much as Khabib. Like, thing is, but having a wrestler like Khabib, though, is just not many of them. And usually if there is someone who resembles him style wise, their last name is probably Magomed or something like unless you're one of those Dagestani fighters he's connected to, essentially, you don't have a grappler like Khabib Nurmagomedov in the lightweight division. Like, it just doesn't happen. He's a very difficult guy to prepare for.
Absolutely. And I think while Dustin has perhaps the arsenal and like the toolbox to actually beat Khabib, it's that factor alone that, yes, he's only been taken down 3 times in his lightweight run in the UFC, but hasn't really faced a wrestler at all. While Khabib has faced probably one of the best variances of resumes in the lightweight division that you can look at, from guys like Gleason Tebow, Pat Healy, to Rafael dos Anjos, to Michael Johnson, who obviously beat Dustin
Barboza,
Conor McGregor, Al Iaquinta. He has faced really everyone in every shade of fighting in the division. Dustin really hasn't yet, and that I think is going to be the big hang-up for me picking him. Though I am really close to picking the upset in Dustin Poirier because I can see him defending the takedown, and then if it's a stand-up battle, he can win that rather easily, in my opinion. And on top of that, if this is just a pure scramble battle, if Khabib really can't be dominant with his positioning on the ground, and there's a lot of scrambles in this game, I could see Dustin getting maybe a submission off of the blue. I can see him pulling something out of his pocket that we don't see because Dustin is that good. But Khabib, just from the experience factor in this division, from facing everyone that you could face, I have to pick Khabib in here. Like he's the safe pick in this fight, even though the upset's live.
Like really, at this point, if you're not picking Khabib Nurmagomedov to win a fight, you probably haven't been paying attention to him. Because it's at a point now. The man's 27-0, so when you're picking against him, you're really trying to buck a trend, a very well established trend at this point, man. It just really doesn't make sense to pick against him right now. As far as some of the style issues are concerned, like you brought up Luke Thomas's breakdown as far as Dustin using submission attempts as ways to sweep and stand back up and whatnot. That is an interesting element that I'd like to see tested against Khabib. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember anybody being able to do that, or at least attempting to do that with any consistency against Nurmagomedov in the past.
No, and I think that's mainly due to Khabib being far too strong.
Right.
Like his wrist control is far too just literally strong in the ground game.
It's suffocating and it's relentless. It's kind of like I think he has a way of establishing his presence to the point where it puts you in a state of panic. And when you're in that state of panic, it's more about just I got to get out of this situation and not thinking, how do I get out of this situation? So you see a lot of guys not going for that Kimura to try to use it to get enough space for their hips to scoot out the other side, or say a guillotine attempt to just threaten that so he doesn't fully commit to the takedown. So, I mean, you don't see that because it's like when he gets you in a bad position, it's so overwhelming and it's so demoralizing that it's a desperation to get up. That a guy will lay there and allow himself to get battered and get dominated in position and try to save that little bit of energy to just do one burst, and maybe they can pop up out of it and start back on the feet. And I think like the Edson Barboza fight is probably the best example of that, where like no matter what he tried, it was like he posts with one arm and he's attempting to get up, and Khabib would stop punching him in the face and then snatch that wrist away and then start punching the face again. He puts that hand back and it's just this rinse and repeat. It's just this continual cycle of dominance. But to have someone countering with instead of positional moves, trying to counter with something that can result in their own offense, sounds like at least a different strategy. It's a different approach, and I'd like to see what it looks like.
And also, I will add, it's hard to tell because in the last fight we saw Dustin, his strength was a main factor in him winning, right? Is the fact that he was able to outmuscle Max Holloway. Is he now a stronger fighter than previously thought, and maybe he can at least not maybe match Khabib in the strength factor, but at least be able to contend there and be able to compete there in pure just positioning control on the ground. But beside the point, I think it's a fantastic fight, and I'm insanely curious to see how this style matchup leads to any holes in Khabib's game that we didn't see was there, like the grappling aspect that we just mentioned, because the next guy up for this fight, or for the winner of this fight, is Tony Ferguson. So if anyone could be unorthodox when it comes to takedown defense and be successful at it, if it's not Dustin Poirier in this division, it's probably Tony Ferguson. Right. So I'm curious to see, because I do think Dustin's going to be a good barometer for what a Tony Ferguson Khabib fight looks like. Dustin now switches a lot in his stance when he hits a lot and when he throws combinations. I was watching back the Max Holloway fight. He would switch combination 3 or 4 times mid combination.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe he did that. Like he outdid what Max Holloway likes to do. Like Dustin Poirier is on a different level than what we previously thought. So I am so close to picking the upset here, but Khabib by decision, probably 48-47 is the safe pick in which I'm going for. Any last thoughts on this main event?
Yeah, I did want to say too, like Holloway has a smoothness to his technique that is interesting to watch, and I think he's Poirier. Excuse me. I think he has a particular balance with a lot of his skills that should be an interesting thing to watch match up against Khabib. So, for instance, like Conor is such a precision striker. He relies on that one laser pinpoint shot to do damage. And that's not exactly going to be the right approach against someone like Khabib, who's continually in your face and constantly giving you pressure. Then you look at someone like Barboza, who almost has to be coming forward or at least standing still in order to get the full strength into his kicks and utilize his full athleticism. You know, once again, that sort of pressure, it just doesn't work that way. Dustin, though, he's able to kind of blend in and adapt and let himself get sloppy and let himself do things that aren't exactly right, but it still works for him. Like I watched some other breakdown of him. I want to say it was one of Dan Hardy's breakdowns, and he's saying how he will sometimes go into a completely square stance and be throwing uppercuts from there, and that is technically wrong to do, but when you're in the heat of battle with someone like Khabib, who was consistently in your face and always on you and stuck on you like glue the whole time, you can't always go by the textbook. The textbook will do you wrong in some of those cases. And you need a guy who's going to be fearless enough to go ahead and try something and let loose. Now, the only person in that lightweight division that I think is more capable of just letting loose and just letting things fly and just seeing what happens is Tony Ferguson. So this is kind of like this is sort of like like you said, a precursor to what Ferguson can be able to do. So I think if Dustin goes out there, wins a couple of rounds, and or at the very least shows himself to consistently be able to put some damage on Khabib in certain positions in certain situations, I think we'll start seeing a chink in the armor. We'll start seeing a little crack of light in there.
I agree completely. Co-main event, speaking of Edson Barboza earlier in terms of Khabib, former opponents, Edson Barboza versus Paul Felder in a rematch. And your thoughts on this fight? I mean, one that I don't think really anyone asked for, and also I think is really high in terms of card placement on a pay-per-view. But hey, it's a card in Abu Dhabi, and we're not gonna get the deepest card. I feel like. Thoughts on the co-main event? Do you think Barboza wins it? Do you think Felder, in this sort of renaissance of his career, is able to win the rematch? Thoughts on the matchup?
You know, it's interesting because this is a fight that I didn't want to see necessarily.
Should be fun.
Now that it's booked, I'm like, I'm into it.
It's a fun fight. Don't get me wrong. Definitely a fun fight.
The first fight of theirs was a very good fight. It was a very entertaining fight. And I think since then, Paul Felder has gotten a lot better. I think his time as an analyst has improved him as a fighter. So I'm gonna just do a quick look at his record. And since he became a commentator and analyst, it's just a certain uptick in his fight IQ, certain things that he just does better now. So since the Barboza fight, he lost that split decision to Ross Pearson, pretty controversial one at that. And since then, he has largely won most of his fights except for a split decision loss to Mike Perry, and that was a fight at welterweight in which he broke his arm, I think, in the second round or something. So take that for what it's worth. And then a loss to Francisco Trinaldo due to a cut. Outside of that, Paul Felder has done a lot of good things, man.
And also, Trinaldo is one of those guys that's highly underrated. How about that point?
Exactly. Yeah, no shame in losing to a guy like Ronaldo. And I think Paul Felder has consistently been at the doorstep of the elite at 155. This fight might be able to put him over. I think we've seen enough improvement in Felder and maybe some decline in Barboza to where I think the gap might be closed. But initially, I thought Barboza won that fight because he was the better athlete. He was able to be just a little bit faster. He was able to with technique-wise, I think they're skill-wise, I think they're kind of neck and neck, at least in the striking department. But Barboza was just a little bit faster. Reflexes was just a little bit better. And just that little bit started widening the gap as the fight went on. I think that gap is closing a lot now, and I'm gonna soft pick for Felder on this one.
I probably agree with you on all points. The only other fight that it really speaks to me in this card is the Duran Calderwood Andrea Lee fight. I love that fight in the women's flyweight division. And the rest of the card's filled with Khabib's stablemates, I feel like, right? The guys that also faced the suspension from the Vegas incident with Conor McGregor, right? Like that. Looking on this list, it's all the same guys.
Never fight in the UFC again.
It's all the guys. Like Zabraya Tukugov, like that was one of the guys. Islam Makhachev was one of the guys. Maribek Tusimov was one of the guys. Who else? There was, I think Muzan Salikov was one of the guys. All of these guys were Khabib's crew, man. So I'd really, this card's a whatever to me. I love the main event. I think the main event is perhaps one of the best fights of the year. Definitely has the potential to be fight of the year as well. Because I think this fight's going to be largely contested with scrambles and on the feet. And we're going to see, one point we haven't mentioned is that Khabib's boxing has been improving with each fight. And, having knocked down Conor McGregor. And honestly, just boxing better with Conor McGregor than previous fights. I am curious to see the improvement of Khabib's boxing with Dustin Poirier. Because that is somebody who you have to have good boxing to really throw combinations with. But the rest of the card, Ant, any sort of highlight that you want to make note of?
The Curtis Blades and Shamil the guy.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. That fight should be an interesting one to watch. I mean, Curtis Blades has the misfortune of fighting Francis Ngannou twice.
So close.
But in a world without Francis Ngannou, you're talking about the clear-cut number one contender in Curtis Blades, and I think a guy that we'd be a lot more excited about. So I'm interested to see that. It's also notable that is the only fight that isn't a lightweight fight that is on the main card. Every other main card fight is contested at 155 pounds. So let's just keep in mind here, this fight is in Abu Dhabi. Yes. And just like the fight over the weekend, the Zhang Weili versus Jessica Andrade fight, it is essentially a regional card that is put together for larger business interests.
Or government interest. I'll add that.
Right,
well.
right. This is the UFC signed something with the Abu Dhabi government about bringing a certain amount of fights over to that land. They have a Muslim champion who let's not forget this. After he beat Conor McGregor at UFC 229, went on a literal world tour where he was hosted by dignitaries and politicians and all sorts of who's who in the influential Muslim world. He was courted by. So this guy is a star in that world. He's got, he had adoring fans lined up for blocks to take pictures and sign autographs with him, much more than you would see with crowds in the U.S. if Khabib Nurmagomedov were to just be at your local GNC signing autographs. So this reaches a different level of stardom that he has, and they're using him along with the long list of Muslim fighters to speak to this audience, to get eyeballs on this and impress the people involved with this new partnership.
I will add, Karim Zidane put out a fantastic piece on sports washing by Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries, I think, on The Guardian. I want to say like yesterday or the day before. Check that piece out if you haven't yet. Kareem is one of the best writers, one of the best geopolitical writers in combat sports, if not the best. I think he is probably. Who else really contends with that? But yes, Khabib's world tour of people in the chat saying "and warlords and dictators."
Pretty much, yeah.
yes. But yes, definitely. I think that the courting of that audience, and on top of that, the oligarchs involved with that audience is definitely the goal here with this event. Similar, it was an attempt that they did back in
2010, the Anderson Silva and Damian Maya card. Yeah, God, that was the same thing. They put on a big show. It was just when they signed the Flash Entertainment deal, and they had bought 10% of the company, and that was to show off. Then they put the best names that they could that were healthy and ready to go for that card. And this is a similar sort of thing, except you just don't have access to every big name because you've got too many cards now. So you got to do what you got to do. So plan B, get a whole bunch of fighters that speak to that region.
Agreed. Moving on, unless you have anything else to say about UFC 242. Actually, one last thing. Pay-per-view sales, because somebody asked us that in the chat. With the new current paradigm of everything on ESPN Plus for pay-per-views, I mean, everything is significantly lowered. If Khabib was fighting Dustin Poirier on terrestrial TV, I think this would be 1 million buys, because I think Khabib is. I think Khabib is now that level of a star.
I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go 1 million.
Look,
I give it like 750.
I think anytime someone does over 2 million, they have such a gigantic long-term star effect. You know, when you hit that number of 2-point-something million buys, you're reaching an era that only like 4 people have hit in their lifetime. Khabib is now one of those, like now 5 or 6 people that have hit that number. He is a significant sporting star. Like when I talk about combat sports with casual fans that are like my friends, that are like truly casuals, right? Khabib is definitely someone they talk about, they mention, they know about this fight, they've asked me about this fight, they've definitely asked me if I'm going to Abu Dhabi. I'm like, joke's on you.
That's
funny.
Hilarious.
Where's the budget for that? But this is on their radar. However, though, because the ESPN Plus paradigm now that all pay-per-views are on that platform, it's not going to break 500,000 buys, but
probably not even in the neighborhood of that.
But something to make note of is that subscriber base for ESPN Plus has been rising significantly. I think it's now well over 2 million. So I think a large part of that is UFC fans. I wouldn't be surprised if they hit a healthy number that we would be shocked by. But if it does 200,000 to 400,000 buys, that's probably far more likely and realistic, just because of the new model, the new paradigm of all pay-per-views on ESPN Plus in the U.S.
Yeah, I just think that the UFC is kind of exhausting the patience for a pay-per-view at this point. To have a paywall behind a paywall is
so stupid.
Yeah, it's just something that just really irritating for a lot of people. Yeah, like if this was something that was available just to order the pay-per-view on ESPN Plus, and you didn't have to subscribe to the service, then I think we're talking. Now we actually can start breaking into some of those bigger numbers. But and I also think a lot of the territories that would be willing to pay to see this fight are going to get it for free just because of the countries that they're in. That this would be showing on a free channel on regular TV packages.
So, this fight's going to be massive. Like, regardless of the pay-per-view number, it's Khabib, and Khabib is now a star. Whether or not he is Mayweather or a exactly Conor McGregor level star, I think it's beside the point. He is absolutely one of the top 3 or 4 biggest stars in MMA right now. If you want to expand to combat sports, he's easily in the top 10, without a doubt. If you have the Canelos, the Joshuas, the Mayweathers, you add all of those in the space. Absolutely, he's in the top 10. And again, he might be in the top 5. He might break that. Like if we're having an argument about who's a bigger star, him or Nate Diaz, like
that's a bigger star. Where is kind of where the follow-up question is going to be for me on that.
And then maybe nowadays in a post Khabib Conor world, is Khabib bigger than John Jones? Like that's a legitimate question to be had, and I don't think it's a far-fetched one. But moving on, let's go out to the breaking news of the MMA world. Unless you have anything else to add, sorry, about UFC 242.
No, I think we ran this one to the ground. It's all good.
Matt, if it was funded by someone else, would you go to Abu Dhabi to cover it, or are you still against them? Yeah, I'm definitely not. I wouldn't be down to go. I'll be honest. Same with like Ruiz Joshua. Like if somebody wanted to pay me to go to that, I'm like, I'm good. Like just give me the money to do other stuff, please. Yeah, I'd rather not go to those countries. Moving on though, obviously the breaking news in the MMA world that shocked Twitter sphere. Everyone debating whether it was a good move or not. Cris Cyborg moving to Bellator. And let's hear Cris Cyborg's own words on the matter.
Happy about that, and my goal is going to be the only female fighter holding 4 different. Hey, Cyber Nation fans, I'm very excited for the announcement. I'm going to be partnership with Scott Coker and Viking. I'll be fighting Bellator, and you guys know I have a lot of girls on 45 pounds. This means we're going to have a lot of fights per year, and I'm very happy about that. And my goal is going to be the only female fighter holding 4 different major titles in the same division. And I know with you guys I can do that, and I just want to say, Cyber Nation, welcome to Bellator.
So, Anthony, obviously the regrouping of Scott Coker, Cris Cyborg, Viacom, everyone getting back together. The band is back. Thoughts on it?
I mean, I was shocked, stunned. Never saw this coming. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we thought was going to happen. I mean, this was, and I've told a gazillion jokes leading up to this. Like I think I tweeted out during her fight against Felicia Spencer at UFC, was that 231? Did I say 231?
Yeah.
That didn't sound right.
It's definitely not 231. It's definitely
240.
No, 239, 240?
No, 240 or 241.
No, because we were at 241 and she was.
That's right, we were at 241. I was at 239, so it wasn't. Oh wait, I was at. Wait,
why are you looking at me, dog?
I don't know. I'm trying. What fight was that?
You.
No, her fight. No, I was at the Nunes fight, the Nunes Cyborg fight. I was. Yeah, you were there too. That was 232.
That's 232. Yes, that was in December.
232. All right, whatever. You know what I'm saying. The Felicia Spencer fight.
I think it was 240 or 238 or one of those numbers.
240.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That was Holloway Poirier, I think.
No, Holloway Poirier. No.
Whatever. Just whatever.
What are you doing?
Well, I got a lot of stuff on my mind. Whatever. All these numbers, it's just confusing.
Yo, guys, at MMA Point right now, listening, like going, like, man, we gave Anthony the bag.
MMA dull.
We gotta rethink that, man. Doesn't have these numbers right.
Oh man. Anyway, so at that fight, I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. I don't even know what point I was.
Cris Cyborg, Felicia Spencer. Cyborg going to Bellator.
Oh yeah. I was joking during that fight that this was the number 1 contender fight for the UFC and Bellator.
Yeah,
that like either one of these ladies was going to move on to fight the champion in the UFC or fight the champion in Bellator, and that was kind of the stakes of this one. We saw this coming a mile away. Like Cyborg leading up to that fight was tweeting about how the Bellator featherweight division was better than the UFC's, and there were so many hints that were dropped on this. Needless, and that's without even going into the whole fiasco about the edited footage that she put out with her so-called confrontation with Dana White backstage.
What a fuck up, by the way.
That ended up being total dog shit without any real tension or confrontation. Like, it was total crap. So with that going on, like, we knew this was happening. We knew this. So it just makes too much sense. There is an actual featherweight division that, granted, it's not the highest profile of names other than Julia Budd, who's their champion, but there is a pool of dedicated featherweight female fighters for Cyborg to go in there and face, as opposed to the UFC calling up a bantamweight to drink a protein shake and not cut weight and come up and fight her, or her to rematch Nunes. And that was the only thing that was left. So it makes sense that she would go there. And also to the freedom that she has with Bellator. Like, do you think she won't be on a Ryzen card now with the Bellator Ryzen partnership?
Oh,
she'll be.
Yeah, she will. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, she's custom made for a New Year's Eve freak show fight. You can put her in against, some 60-year-old former pro wrestler, and people will watch it. She's talked about boxing for years.
I am 100% down for Gabby Garcia versus Cris Cyborg.
I think they're friends. So
I don't care. Open weight, give them the money, put it in Japan, it will sell.
Yeah, it will. So the possibility is open for things like that to happen. And of course, she's been flirting with boxing forever.
I don't want that. No.
But hey, it'd be nice for her pockets. And quite frankly, if Cyborg were to get in a boxing match, how many other boxers would get top billing over
her? 3.
Look, Clarissa Shields and
3 probably would be Shields, Brackus, and Taylor would probably be the 3 that get top billing over her.
Yeah. So you're talking about some sort of attraction that will attract money. If Cyborg has the flexibility that a Bellator contract typically does, and if I'm not mistaken, Mark Raimondi of ESPN tweeted out earlier today that her contract is a flexible one where she can go do pro wrestling, she can go do boxing or Muay Thai or any other combat discipline, and she's not exclusive to Bellator. So it just makes a lot of sense for her because that's the sort of freedom that she wouldn't get in the UFC. Then on top of that, despite the fact that the sponsorship market is so dried up, Cyborg is one of the few names who could still get top dollar for having logos on her trunks. That Reebok payoff check will be nothing compared to the brands that will be throwing money to be somewhere on her trunks. So Cyborg is coming out ahead in this. It makes the most sense. She's actually with a promoter that she doesn't go to war with, that originally helped build her into a star, and she can ride out the rest of her career under much more friendly and favorable conditions.
For anyone that's listening, maybe on Blog Talk, or just trying to call in on Blog Talk, where it seems like we're having some issues, calling on Skype for sure. That's 100% working. Mixed Combat Radio on Skype. But digressing, I agree on all parts. I think this is a great move for Cyborg. It's obvious that the relationship with her and Dana in the UFC was never a cordial one, to put it lightly. And the second she lost to Amanda Nunes, it was clear that the UFC, from their framing in the arguments and the framing the negotiation in the public, that was their indicator. Oh, we can cut ties now.
Now we can do what we want with her.
Yeah, it's our excuse to get rid of her now. And I think that going to Scott Coker and Bellator, I think she's going to be far happier there, to be honest. And I think, look, if you're a fighter and you are in a position and you're not happy, go to a position where you are happy. Especially if you're the name like Cris Cyborg and you have leverage, you have a brand, you can go get a deal somewhere. Even though the UFC didn't really do the best by trying to match and have a negotiation period with her, she was still able to get a, quote, biggest deal in women's MMA history. Whether or not that's the case is beside the point. I know that she probably got a big deal. Plus, from what we know, from what we're about to get into, Bellator's revenue shares in the last couple of years have been quite good with the fighters. So
right.
I'm assuming she's going to get paid.
I mean, they're claiming this is the biggest deal for a female mixed martial artist. Now, whether or not I'm not taking that quote at face value.
Did you see the recent thing from One Championship that said that they have a potential 4.2 billion audience? Why?
Yeah,
Why?
Just it's not necessary. It's really not necessary. Like, if they don't just stop with the bullshit, if they just knock it off. They make a good product. Their fights are fun to watch. They have a good stable of fighters. And I say this every time you mention One Championship. I love kickboxing with little gloves. It makes me very happy. It makes my heart smile. But
if you don't follow,
4.2 billion people are not watching that. I'm sorry.
I'll be honest. Look, you know me. I've talked to you about this a lot, Anthony. And Jason, if you're listening, I apologize. I have not watched a single one championship card this year, or probably even last year. What I do watch is their highlight clips on IG, because they post like all the knockouts on IG and all the highlights on IG. And, I kind of just watch it there. And I agree. Little gloves and kickboxing. I approve. I approve of this message.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Like one championship puts on a fine product, but 4.2 billion people are not checking out whatever show you got in a back alley in West Bumblefuck somewhere. No, sorry. It's just not going down like that. And they're giving away a lot of these tickets too. So I don't know if you've been following this. So shout out to Dana Blauwen, who has the Asian MMA podcast.
Great guy.
Friend of the show. Great dude.
Friend of the show.
Great dude. Great show. And on Twitter, another gentleman, Jonathan of Colon, who you follow him, and he's got a lot of good information as well. So they've been posting things where they're in Asia, and they've been posting things where they're seeing vouchers for tickets like scattered on the street, Facebook ads where they're literally begging photographers to come and check them out, and just saying, bring any camera, no experience required. We need people to pretend like people care about this. It's pretty sad.
Hey,
it's pretty damn sad.
One championship. How dare you do that? But hey, if you want to pay me like $30,000 or like $60,000 a year, somewhere in between that, I will fully come out to Singapore like all the time and then take pictures for you guys. Do not worry about it at all. Just want to put that out there into the universe. One championship. Jason, you got the hookup.
Matt Hunter for sale.
100% for sale. Absolutely. Come on. Speaking of for sale, the UFC antitrust hearings have been going on. Obviously, the class action lawsuit. John Fitch involved. I think probably one of the most famous fighters involved in the case, Kung Lee as well. Jason Cruz, John Nash, and Paul Gift, an economist professor from Pepperdine University. John Nash, probably one of the smartest people in the industry, period. And Jason Cruz, who is a lawyer, I think an economist lawyer as well. They were all there at the hearings, and we're going to play a little clip from the podcast Show Money. Go check it out. SoundCloud, iTunes, all that stuff, as well as read an excerpt from Paul Gift's Forbes article. First, actually, let's read the excerpt from the article. I'll post the link in the live chat for those that maybe want to read it as well. It's a long piece. I definitely implore everyone to read it in depth because I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's just too many big words. But let's get to the part that I think is perhaps the most important part. Hal Singer, one of the plaintiffs being the fighters in the class action lawsuit, he is one of the experts on the case for them and their side. Singer acknowledges his work is out of the norm. The plaintiffs claim the UFC anti-competitively monopolized the output market for MMA events and the input market for MMA fighter services through the use of long-term exclusive fighter contracts, with the end result being suppressed fighter compensation. In a typical labor market monopolization case, one could examine actual dollar wages and attempt to see if the challenge conduct reduced compensation. That wouldn't bode well for the plaintiff since the UFC pays more than other MMA promoters, and fighter pay has been steadily rising over the years. Instead, Singer has argued MMA is a special case where wage share should be examined rather than overall wage level, and specifically wage level being your overall pay, wage shares being how much of pay is being distributed from the owners to the employees, or in this case, independent contractors. And let's play this clip from the podcast Show Money.
If you made it this far, you should hopefully you know what the hell is going on. But if you don't, again, I'm going to bring it up, the stakes in a little bit. If it passes class cert, that we can group all the fighters together, even those that haven't signed on, as one class, the 1,215 UFC fighters, into one class and sue together for a class action for all their damages together. It's a massive. Oh,
massive. You were saying so we had a break again.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of damages potentially to the UFC. Now they could be just getting past the hurdle class cert increases the pressure on the UFC, the defendant side, to come up with some sort of settlement. Because the further it goes along, even if you're confident in your case, the further it goes along, the closer you are that, oh my God, what if you do lose? We get that much closer to the possibility. We could lose, and if we lose in trial, it's triple damages, and probably even bigger is the court will apply the remedies. And remedies in this case, I think, is a big deal because who knows what the remedies here, the court is going to come to a solution of how we balance the playing field. And there was a hint in one of the reports what the plaintiffs are thinking of, and I think you missed this though. The plaintiffs talked about like one thing would be like a year-long maximum contract with no
options. I think that.
Now, again, check out the whole podcast. There's multiple podcasts they did throughout the week, each day, because each day had its own hearing to examine all the evidence in the case, but to sort of, again, re-examine what was just said there and maybe rephrase it to sort of help people understand. If this goes through class action certification and we go through the court process and the plaintiffs win, the court then gets to redecide what is fair in this market, what is fair in a UFC fighter's contract. And taking that control away from the UFC would be absolutely damaging, let alone the monetary damages there would then be owed to give to all of the UFC fighters, over 1,200. And I think that is including former UFC fighters as well. Mm-hmm. So this is a massive, massive news story and potential outcome in the sport because, again, most of the framing from all these gentlemen that have been there, including guys like Josh Gross, who's been there, longtime reporter, all the framing from this last week has been the plaintiffs were largely successful. That the pure evidence they produced wasn't satisfactory for a lot of these guys, including Paul Gift, John Nash. But when it came to the hearing, apparently they were gangbusters. Like, they were just fantastic. Hal Singer, others were able to just blow away the UFC lawyers, it seems, and UFC experts in testimony. And it seems like the judge was largely on the plaintiff's side. So this case is not even close to being done. There's still large processes to be had, but a huge, seemingly, win for the plaintiffs and UFC fighters as a whole, and a huge shift towards a different paradigm completely in the UFC landscape and MMA as a whole. If UFC fighters only have a maximum of a year-long contract with multiple options at the end, I'm intrigued by this story more than probably any other right now in the MMA space. Anthony, your thoughts on the antitrust hearing and the stories coming out of it?
This is by far the most important thing going on in mixed martial arts, and it's not even close. 242 should be a fun card, and that main event means a lot and stuff, but it is nothing at all compared to this antitrust suit. So, and we're learning so much in such a short period of time that these hearings took place. Like, remember for years, Lorenzo Fertitta was always saying, whenever he's asked the percentage of the revenue that went to the fighters, and they always say this was comparable to the NFL and Major League Baseball and all the major stick and ball sports. We thought it was a lie. We're pretty sure it was. And by far it was a lie. Like, not even close. So this is a point that I've brought up a couple of times on the trenches. And I think it makes sense to bring this up again. When the UFC purchased Strikeforce, and they inherited those old contracts, and some of the Strikeforce fighters got rolled over into the UFC. There was a point in time where Dana White was on record complaining about how much they were getting paid, and he was saying, like, these Strikeforce guys are getting paid too much. Well, that is partly because the original owners of Strikeforce were also the owners of the San Jose Sharks. They were used to paying their athletes a certain percentage of the revenue coming in, which was on par with the other sport that they were involved in. The NHL obviously has its own union for the athletes to, argue how much they deserve to get paid of broadcasting deals and ticket sales and everything else associated with the money that's going to be generated by the teams.
Video game, everything.
Exactly.
Yep.
So they had this structure already in Strikeforce, and not saying Strikeforce was a perfect promotion. Bellator is more on this line too. I think Bellator's wage share percentage was like 63% or something like that.
We can let me get to those specific wage shares because I have them up right now. First, let's get to boxing because I think that's something that was talked about in the podcast that you should go check out again. Check out the podcast because they go really in depth. Audio is not the best because they're in a bar recording it, but that does lead to some funny moments, I will say. Makes me definitely want to record in a bar more often.
Before you go on, because I'll definitely forget this point if I don't say it now. When we look at the differences in wage shares and everything, and we see the success of the UFC, you got to wonder now, and this is something that I think a lot of people didn't consider with how big the UFC is as a brand. How much of the size and scope of their brand is because they just paid the fighters less? You see so many promotions that fold. Affliction was criticized for paying these guys way too much money. They folded. And there's story after story of promotions that were told they paid too much and they folded. The UFC is here, thriving and buying out all these other promotions. So let that just be food for thought and get your noodle cooking. Continue. I'm sorry.
Let's talk about revenue shares, or I should say wage shares, specifically since that's the legal term that's being used. John Nash reporting some of the numbers that have come out from the hearing. Golden Boy's numbers, 62%. Top Rank, 71%. Something called Warriors, I haven't heard about that, 65.4%. Lou DiBella is saying 60% is common. Top Rank's yearly revenue split, 67% 2013, 68% 2014, 69% 2015, 80% in 2016, and that coincides with the ESPN deal as well. Massive number there. Bellator's numbers, 2014, 74%, 2012, 70%, 2013, 76%, 2014, massive dip, 30%. 2015, even more massive dip, negative 33%. I don't know how that's possible that the owners or the executives take more money than the fighters make in 2015. In 2016, you have 30%. 2017 and 2019, annual 64%. In 2020, projection 25% dip. So numbers all over the place for Bellator, but overall significantly better than what we see for the UFC. This is a graph that's been compiled from the numbers from the hearing from John Nash. The numbers were at 40% in the early 2000s and then dipped all the way to just hovering over 10% in 2005. Coincides with the Spike deal, the Ultimate Fighter, just massive revenue gains for the UFC. Also, massive revenue disparity between and wage disparity between the fighters and the executives. And that number kind of stagnated and didn't go. It hit around mid-20s in the late 2000s, late aughts, so to speak, and it just hovered around 20% all the way through. Now, the revenue split for pay-per-view numbers, because Jay's asking me down in the chat, it was a little bit higher. It was around 30 to 40%. I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. I apologize. But I know those numbers are available in one of these podcasts. So check them out. But overall, if you look at, especially boxing, because the boxing is the one I use, the comparison I use for a market reference more than anything, a market benchmark, to use the term that the judge used in the hearing, a benchmark that he wanted. And the UFC attorneys weren't able to give one, a benchmark to what a model looks like that has these types of wage shares. And the UFC attorneys could not give one. But if you look at boxing, it's significantly different. Where it's around, like what Lou DeBell says, the average is 70%. And if that's the average in boxing, and the average in MMA is significantly lower across the board, even though Bellator has some good years, it is still significantly lower than, I would say, what boxing is. Something is wrong there, significantly wrong there.
Well, I mean, let's examine though what could kind of skew those numbers for boxing. I mean, first let's acknowledge that the Ali Act has something to do with what's going on because the fighters have a little more leeway as far as what they can do and getting locked into long contracts and whatnot.
Absolutely, yes.
And one thing that the UFC and other MMA promotions have benefited from is having in-house rankings. And they're able to decide who gets title shots and whatnot, as opposed to having independent sanctioning bodies, decide upon that for the promoters. So there's a level of control in that sense with the Ali Act. But then also too, some boxers are paid so much money that those numbers have to get skewed. When you're talking about, you're throwing tens of millions of dollars at Canelo or
but then
Deontay Wilder or something like that.
Yeah, but then we look at like individual events, and I'll try to find them really fast. But I know that we had like individual events, like certain George St. Pierre pay-per-view events. We had specific revenue information on certain Brock Lesnar events. It was still, compared to boxing, demonstrably lower in terms of wage share. Like even the big names for UFC are getting underpaid comparative to boxing. So of course it's getting skewed. I think when you take out big names, the number drops significantly in boxing. But even with the big names in UFC, the number is still significantly low. That's the point. Like even the big names are getting significantly underpaid. And honestly, that's where you're going to see this huge percentage discrepancy is with those big names, because those big names are making so much more dollars in boxing comparative to MMA and the UFC.
Yeah,
so your point's correct, but that doesn't take away from
agreed.
What is the issue here? That's what
I also would like to cite something you brought up that kind of rose the anger of a particular MMA manager out there, where you were talking about Jones' guaranteed pay for UFC 232. I think this was Cyborg's guaranteed pay as well.
Yes,
$500,000 for 232.
Yes,
I want to say Nunes was guaranteed $350,000.
Yes, she was.
I'm not mistaken.
Yes, she was.
So you were pointing out those numbers and saying, hey, this pay-per-view was reported to sell like 8,500,000 buys, just something along.
It was like 700,000. It was a really good number. It was a healthy number for sure.
All right, and showing their guaranteed money as opposed to what Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury made guaranteed for their fight, which sold about half that.
Yeah,
big difference, very, very big difference. And guaranteed money is where it's at. Just like when we look at NFL contracts and we see like this guy signed for 8 years for $120 million. That sounds fantastic, but that $120 million is incentivized. It's a lot of other things involved there other than just showing up and playing. The guaranteed money is where it's at. So if your guaranteed is that low when you're selling that many pay-per-views, there is a problem.
Here we go. Here's the number that you would like to know, because it is significantly lower, which isn't surprising because we know that payouts for boxers on undercards is criminal. It's downright criminal. John Nash, according to data Golden Boy provides, they made $55 million in 2016 and paid boxers $7.8 million, 14%. Zimbalist, I think that's one of the lawyers, pointed out this doesn't seem to include Canelo's $27 million, which would bring the share up to 63%. So that's where you get that big increase to where you get more in the 60s to 70 percentile for boxing wage shares. Jay trolling me in the chat. Hilarious. I'm trying to find that George St. Pierre one because that one was sad. I remember seeing that and going, oh, George, you got screwed over big time, because George was like a guy that was doing million buys, 800,000, 700,000 buys consistently. He was getting paid $2-3 million in back end money. Like, that's nothing. Like, there's guys on Showtime right now in boxing that do 400,000, 500,000 viewers get paid that.
Yeah, like I think of a guy like Tank Davis.
Yep.
You know, like how much money is he pulling in? And he's
Danny Garcia.
Or Adrian Bronner. Think about the money that he's pulling in, although he flushes it down the toilet, like literally flushes it down the toilet if you've ever seen his trash Instagram. But yeah, man, like there is a problem. There's a big problem across the board, really.
Let's go to callers. Kevin in Chicago has been wanting to get on. Let's go to Kevin in Chicago. Kevin, are you there?
Yep, you hear me?
Yes. What's up, man?
What's up? Just got a couple points to make. My first stop before I get to the fights, Kareem Zidane. What's up? What was the article about? Something about Muslims bad, dictators bad, blah blah blah, something like that.
Are you serious right now?
No, I'm dead serious. I heard of the Kareem dude, but what was the gist of the article? I'm guessing was about Kadyrov or some dictators in
Ramzan
Russia, something like that, right?
No, that's not the article I'm talking about. It was about Saudi Arabia.
But he is the one that's done a lot of the investigations
Yes.
about Ramzan Kadyrov.
The article I wasn't talking about was not about that, but sure.
Oh, so he was talking about the other Muslim dictators in the Middle East. He was talking about.
Sure.
Okay, so you wouldn't go to Saudi Arabia because their culture doesn't line up with American culture?
This has nothing to do with American culture, just that they have very stark human rights abuses. They're currently involved with the genocide. I wouldn't want to be involved with sports washing that.
Okay, we could say the same thing about the United States. We're funding
You know what the difference is?
genocides. We're
You know what the difference is?
genocides. We're bombing people. Killed a
Kevin,
million Iraqis.
Kevin,
We-
I agree with all those points. But you know what the difference is? The United States government is not paying for boxing events or UFC events or MMA events to be put on, to be used as a propaganda for those atrocities that you're talking about. Excuse me. Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, these countries we're talking about, their governments are literally paying for these sporting events to be put on to entice Western companies, Western media to sports wash the atrocities. That's the difference. It's a very key difference.
I see no difference. It's the country committing atrocities. You're hosting an event in the country.
You're missing a very key element.
The events in that country. You're supporting the government. You're paying.
No.
No, if you partake of something that happens to be in a country, you're not supporting that country necessarily. That's like saying I'm driving to Burger King. I'm going to go get a Whopper, so I must be in full support of everything the American government has done. That's not the same thing.
Again, the government in Saudi Arabia is literally paying these fighters to be there for Ruiz Joshua. Abu Dhabi is literally paying for these guys to be there. Kadyrov in Chechnya is literally paying for MMA promotion to sports wash a human rights violations. So it is different, demonstrably different than in the U.S., where the U.S. government is not paying for these sporting events. You understand?
Okay.
Do you see that that's not? Do you understand that being a key difference? Because it is a key difference.
I see the key difference, but by supporting American companies, American business, you do support the atrocities that go on.
No.
Same thing.
No.
Israel.
No, that's not the case. That's not the case. That's not the case.
The companies that you're talking about, are they funding the government?
Hold on, Kevin. So, in your mind, if I have an iPhone, I'm in support of like sweatshops, right? That's your logic, right?
Yeah, like it or not, that's true. Yep.
Yeah, that's a very stupid point.
I mean, it's the truth, though.
It's not. It's not. Because you know why? The modes of society and the economy mean that I have to have a phone. It means I have to have a computer to do my job. Doesn't mean I support sweatshops. Actually, I can be actively against those things and still have to participate in society.
You support the machine, though. That's the thing.
No,
You-
no,
what-
no, no,
like,
no, 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 no. No, I don't.
Whether
No,
intentionally or not, you do.
no, no,
It may be hard to come to terms with, but you do.
no,
same thing you
no,
said
no.
about
It's
these
not.
different
It's
finance
vastly different. It's vastly different. And the fact that you are using this like hack ass like Dave Rubin-esque talking point is really sad, Kevin.
Dave Rubin.
It's really
Yeah, 'cause
sad.
I'm sure
It's
he's
really
supporting-
sad. I just don't have time for this today, man. Like, you want to call
Yeah,
in and talk to?
You let that fly longer than I thought you would.
I mean, look. I mean, he was on for like an hour or so and talking about SJWs in the chat. Like,
there's no
I'll
cure for stupid.
I'll humor him, but the fact that he, like, again, it's the oh,
No, it's whataboutism.
You use things in society, therefore you support everything that's bad about it. It's like, no, like, I have to eat, I have to call people on the phone. If I don't have those things, I can't participate in society. And to be honest, Kevin, because you're too fucking stupid to understand this, if I don't have these things, I actually can't actively participate against the machine or whatever term you want to use there, buddy. Okay? And if you don't understand the difference between a government paying for an event to sports watch a genocide and human rights atrocities compared to, again, people just living within a society, being born within a society, and having to react to that society, then, man, look, you are far too stupid to be on this show and to waste my damn time. I gave you at least 5 minutes. You're good to go, man. You're a bigot against Muslim cultures? Kevin, how am I a bigot against Muslim cultures? What the hell?
Just shut the fuck up, dude. Like,
Dude, I'm one of the biggest like pro-Palestine people you're ever gonna meet in this space, in this industry. Fuck off, you weirdo, man. God. Bye, Kevin. Bye. I don't got time for you, buddy. I don't. Anthony, that's gonna be it for tonight, man.
yeah, that.
We're gonna end on that good note, man. Kevin,
Get your mans. Get your mans. That's your man. That's your man right there.
Saying that a country shouldn't bomb hospitals, shouldn't bomb schools, shouldn't, treat women as not even second-class citizens, as non-citizens, treat the LGBT community as criminal because of their nature. Yeah, man, fuck off, man. Like, I don't gotta appreciate you. I don't have to. But anyways, find me, Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. Hit the like button, share the show, subscribe, patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. Anthony, what's up, man?
I'm like, man, I don't do a caller show.
You're not used to it, man, huh?
Yeah, I'm not. So I haven't done that in a while. So of course, when I was part of Sherdog Radio Network, did call in shows, and interacting with calls is fun. But I was just hoping to be somebody smarter than that. Kevin, you trash, bro.
Trash. Oh, let's try. Let's try Blog Talk really fast. Actually, I didn't try Blog Talk because I thought it wasn't working. Let's try it really fast. 773. Who is this? 773.
Yeah, man, I'm not going to talk about the Muslims. Let's just talk about the fight real quick.
Oh, no, it's Kevin? Nah, man, fuck off. I don't care about you, bro. Like, you understand, Kevin? Like, I don't give a fuck about you. Bye. Deuces. You're going to talk about the Muslim thing, man. Fuck off.
I got my hopes up like, we're going to talk to somebody who actually know what the fuck they talking about. No, Kevin.
Nope, it's Kevin again. But Kevin, keep trying to call in. I appreciate the hustle of being an idiot. Libertarians and right-wingers like you are commonly stupid. So, hey, I'm used to it now. But anyways, find me, Matt Hunter, MCR, all platforms. Hit the like button, share the show, subscribe, patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio. Also, Trending Now Network, our other channel. Anthony.
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Ant Walker MMA. It's also my Instagram. I don't post much, but do it anyway. Tomorrow on the Sherdog YouTube channel, you can check me and the homie Jason Burgos for the Trenches, the weekly live chat. So go on and don't say stupid stuff in the chat because I will fire you up. But go on and watch the show. Enjoy. Ask me some good MMA questions. We'll get it cracking.
Peace.
Everybody's on steroids. The whole UFC, everybody.
You disrespect boxing, you piece of shit?
Are you off your tits? Have you been smoking something?
That's stupid. Use your common sense.
Stay off the weed.
Just send me location.
Hey, pussy, are you still there?